Okay, our keynote speaker tonight, as you know, is Mr. Scott Hagerstrom. Sorry. Tell you just a little bit about Scott, and then I'm sure he'll fill in the rest. Scott is a lifelong Michigan resident. He's an attorney in the state of Michigan. He's been active in Michigan politics and grassroots movements for a long time, 25 years, I believe, is the correct time. He was the director of the Americans for Prosperity, and now he's director for Donald Trump campaign in Michigan. We're very happy and very pleased to welcome Mr. Scott Hagerstrom to the Tea Party. Please give him a hand.
Great, thank you. So how are you doing this evening? Good? Great, well it's great to be back. I've spoken a few times to Lapeer Tea Party and have known Bill for a long time and had the pleasure of getting to know and working very closely with your next congressman, Paul Mitchell. And he is truly one of us. And it was a pleasure to work with him, and that was probably one of the highlights of my career, to be able to work on defeating Prop 1. And I think that was sort of the beginning of what we see now with the Trump, what's going on around the country. No one predicted that would go down 80-20. There was no poll that showed that. I think we were hoping it would get maybe in the high 50s, low 60s if we were lucky. We have to remember that top officials in the Republican and Democratic Party, all the newspapers, all the media, were pushing for passage. And all the special interests had their hand in there. At the end of the day, outspent 20 to 1, 10 million to about $500,000. And the people of Michigan really, they got information, they looked at the issues real hard, and that was tied in January in the mid-40s. But on May 5th, when they voted, it was almost 81% to 19%. And that's pretty remarkable. So I do have a lot of trust in the voters here in the state of Michigan. And if you look at that and how they got the polling wrong, completely wrong, they didn't even predict that kind of landslide defeat. So we need all of you in this room to get out there and make phone calls and hit doors and spread the message on Mr. Trump and what he can do for our country, as opposed to Hillary Clinton. So I'm going to talk a little bit, but I'd love to take your questions about what you're hearing out there, what you're seeing. Polling. So we've seen that it can be very wrong, as I just talked about Prop 1. Here in Michigan, back in the primary, Hillary Clinton, one poll had her winning by 22 points. A few days later, she was defeated by Bernie Sanders. So there's not a lot of enthusiasm on the Democratic side. A lot of this is about who turns out. Now, on the Republican side, we even seen a couple polls that came out a couple days before showing Trump losing Michigan. Other polls had him up, but just barely. He ended up winning by 12 points. And so as we move forward now, there's actually a couple polls that show Mr. Trump up in Michigan. And one is by Reuters, Ipsos, IPSOS. And by 538, they're actually ranked an A- poll, a very top quality poll. 2 weeks ago, when they first did the poll, they showed Trump up by 1 point. And a lot of people said, well, that's a fluke. A week later, he's still up by 1 point in that poll. Another poll that's very credible, the Washington Post, showed Trump down by 1 point. So we're right in the game. No Republican has won Michigan since 1988. But I think Trump's message is very different. He's a very different kind of candidate. And this is very, very doable. Nationally, the polls are coming back. Are you guys excited about that? Okay. Does anyone here have any questions about, do we have any people that here were Cruz supporters? Now, are you on board with Trump now? No? Did I have a no? Okay. Okay. So that means you're on board. Do we have your vote? Oh, okay. That's what we need. Yes. Okay. Well, I have to say I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm a lifelong Michigan resident. My family, my dad's retired from GM just a couple years ago, machine repair in Romulus. I lived in Inkster as a little kid, moved to every time there was a recession, they had to move away. When I went to college, they had to move to Indianapolis. So in the lottery of jobs, we've seen a lot of our friends and family have to move out of the state, going back to the 80s. And every time there's a recession, people lose their jobs, good-paying jobs, and when we come to the other side of the recession, we never come out quite as well as before. Now, that's changing a little bit now with passage of right to work and some other great things that have been happening in Lansing that we never thought, frankly, we'd see here in Michigan. But I know a lot of people, Trump had almost a record amount of votes, nearly 14 million. They said he wasn't serious about running. They said he wouldn't file his paperwork. They said he couldn't win a primary. They said he couldn't get over 33%. Then it was 40. Then it was 50. He's constantly outperformed the polls in state after state. I have had the pleasure of working for him in New Hampshire up to the 10 days before up to the New Hampshire primary, working in Ohio, working in Missouri after the vote, because Cruz's campaign manager is from Missouri, and it was real close. We were watching the certification of the votes, and then serving as state director in Nebraska for the Trump campaign, and then actually getting to go out and campaign in Nancy Pelosi's district. So that was a lot of fun. I'd never been to the San Francisco area before, and so it wasn't as bad as what I had heard. So if we think back over the years, just think back a year ago. Who did we all think was going to be the nominee? Did you think it was going to be Bush? No, really? Okay. So the Republican Party, if we look at who they nominate, they usually go with whose turn it is. So there was Bush, there was Walker, there was a few people out there that were considered more mainstream. Interestingly enough, the grassroots has come a lot further than groups. I was with Americans for Prosperity, and it's interesting that we were way out there on a lot of issues, but as the country and the voters on the right moved more to the right, some of the groups failed to move with them as much. And I think that's why you see Donald Trump bringing out. Would you have ever thought between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, over 50% of primary voters here in Michigan would have picked the two most conservative candidates? I mean, it's quite amazing. They voted for John McCain in 2000. They voted for Romney. Yeah, Romney won in 2012. So we come at it, all the people, you guys talk to your friends, and you talk to people you know, and we're all in the same circles. But when you look at the polling and you look at what's out there and what's in Michigan with the unions, you have to consider it's pretty remarkable they chose Donald Trump. The second vote getter was Cruz. And if you look at as a nation, just a few years ago, to think that we would have a candidate that would be where Mr. Trump is, we would not be talking about immigration issues. We would not be talking about building a wall. A lot of issues we wouldn't be talking about. Mr. Trump has driven that debate, very much so. And when you compare him to Hillary Clinton, there just is no comparison. When you look at Gary Johnson, one of the things that we did when I was at Americans for Prosperity that we fought tooth and nail, it was a climate tax. Gary Johnson, he says he's libertarian, but he just came out for a huge carbon tax. That doesn't sound very libertarian to me, less government. So, when you look at TPP, you look at NAFTA, you look at China as a currency manipulator, all issues that Hillary's on the other side. She has a long history of herself and her husband. Second Amendment. I mean, she stated outright one of her goals is to turn back the Supreme Court's interpretation of the Second Amendment. And when you look at how many Supreme Court justices are up, we will lose the Supreme Court for the next 50 years if she's elected president. When you look at immigration, if the Democrats take the White House and they push through Congress allowing all the illegal people here to vote, we'll never win another election on the issues that we care about. Never again. Energy independence. Trump, without a doubt, would build a Keystone pipeline, which would bring thousands, I think it's over 1,100 jobs just to Michigan. You look at coal. Hillary Clinton supported coal miners once upon a time, but it was politically convenient to sell them out. And she now publicly says she will put many coal miners out of work. You know, she sold out that industry for political expediency. What industry will she sell out next? Will it be automakers? Because that's the next target of the environmental lobby. TPP. Yeah, TPP. A year ago, when she published her book, she had a paragraph in there about how she supported it. Somehow, miraculously, in the second edition, that paragraph's gone. And she claims now she's opposed. However, the governor of Virginia, a friend of hers, said one of the first things she'll do is make sure TPP gets through. So, you know, we have someone that's a builder. He's remade the New York skyline. You know, has he had some failures? Yeah, sure. But anyone that tries in life and works is going to have failures. But how you measure a person, how do they come back from that? What do they do next? And I think Mr. Trump has proven over and over that he's not afraid to go out there and take risks. He knows how to build. He knows how to put things together, build wealth. He's a job creator. Let's look at Hillary Clinton. She has profited, her and her husband have profited completely off of government. I mean, I think she's had the worst 2.5 weeks of her whole political career. And based on her history and what appears to be there, it's well-deserved. I don't know how, does everyone here watch Fox News? Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I need to go, how in-depth you want me to go on some of these issues. But something else with the polls, there's called a shaming effect. And when Wilder in Virginia was running for governor in 1989, he was the first black candidate for governor there, a lot of people were afraid to say who they really supported because they didn't want to be labeled bigoted or racist. And so when the polls showed he was going to easily win, he ended up barely winning. Jesse Helms, when they do polling in North Carolina, many polls would show him down by a couple points and losing, but he would win easily. Again, people didn't want to share publicly who they were really supporting. Here in Michigan, with Michigan Civil Rights Initiative in 2006, polls showed that that was going to lose and end up winning easily. So that's something else we see in the polling, the shaming effect, and we believe that's happening now here in Michigan. So when I see a poll with him up by 1 or 2, I really think it's much better. It's much greater. So as far as materials, we have signs coming in next week. We have door knocking materials. How many people here have knocked doors or made phone calls for Trump? Nobody? Okay. So who has a pen? Does everyone have a pen? I'm going to give you some information so you can make a call. Okay, Eric Slumkowski, you can put Eric. He's your contact for Lapeer. His number is 586-480-6103. Call him up. It's 586-480-6103. Or you can email info.mi@donaldtrump.com. info.mi@donaldtrump.com. Or you can call our main office toll-free, 855-678-1100. Yeah, I've worked in politics for 25 years, mostly on the state level. And Donald Trump, I believe, is the right candidate at the right time. The system is rigged. People know it. No matter how hard you work and play by the rules, people feel like they can't get ahead because they don't have a lobbyist in Lansing. They don't have a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump is the first candidate to really speak to that. And he's serious. He's dead serious. Over the past several months working for him, I've met a lot of people that have known him over the years. I just had lunch today with someone that worked with him back in the 90s. And they see that the real Donald Trump, they don't see the press is not showing the real Donald Trump. He is sincere. He's going to break up the system. He's going to change Washington, D.C. And I think that's why we see a lot of people on the Republican and the Democratic side that have a problem with him, because there's trillions of dollars at stake. The system has been set up to benefit a certain class of people, the elites. And I don't really even see this election as a Republican versus Democrat. I see it as the political class versus the American people. And that's something that Donald Trump is going to change. You know, he's been through several campaign teams, and people always try to control him. And they're like, who's in charge of the campaign? Well, there's one person in charge of the campaign, and that's Donald Trump. He literally only sleeps about 4 hours a night. I mean, he is constantly working. You've seen his kids, how talented they are. You know, the media, you know, we have two opponents. We have the media, and we have, you know, look at what we're facing on a global stage. Look what we're facing here in America. National security issues in 1980 with Jimmy Carter. You look at the state of our economy, 19 trillion going up to 21, 22 trillion. You look at a system that needs to change. And there's one person that's had the experience and his life experience to get things done. Budget, in record time, he got that ice skating rink done. And he can truly get things done. I would love to take your questions. If there's any issues out there, anything you allowed on TV, but questions.
First thing, what are some of the, and we'll make sure that we'll make sure that we get all the information, phone calling, door knocking. But can you describe anything else that can be gets out? Because Lapeer County, even though it's a fairly conservative county, you get white
Sure.
as red. So what can we, what are the best ways, in your opinion, that we can help you out?
The number one thing you can do is hit doors. We need people to get out there and hit doors. When you're on a phone, there's people that just won't answer the phone. There's people that won't give you the same response. So doors is absolutely the most important thing. Does that mean we're not doing phones? No. There's people that are disabled. There's people that are elderly that can't do the doors, peninsula that we need to reach. So we will be doing phones. But the number one thing, 5, 6 people. And where if I was on the phones, you feel like you're clicking along because you can reach 50 people. So I would encourage you to the RNC operation here in the state, meet with them on a weekly basis, and we're working as a team. And this is about getting the job done on November 8th. And I would encourage anybody that has petty differences or problems, if you can't get along, just get out there and hit doors. But we need to put those aside till November 9th. We can go back and settle those later. But again, having done this for 25 years, to have a candidate like Donald Trump, who is willing to talk about issues that nobody else has been willing to talk about, is remarkable. Now, like I said, some of you, we're behind the candidates. There were 17 people. We're all grown-ups. We all knew one person would come out on top. And in the past, I wasn't excited about people like Mitt Romney and McCain, but I supported them. I didn't go out and badmouth them. I voted for them. So Mr. Trump is the candidate. We need to win Michigan for him. We need to get the message out there. In the 1st Congressional District, Bergman, that's a toss-up seat. You got Tim Walberg down in the 7th. We have Supreme Court justices. We need to keep control of the Michigan Supreme Court. We have our education boards, and then we have the Michigan House. Right now, Republicans have 63 of 110 seats, and there's 15 that are considered toss-ups. Half of those are incumbents, and the other half are leaving because they're termed out. But it's vitally important. You know, rising tides raise all boats. So that's why, you know, there's an interest in Trump. We need to get people out. We need to spread the message. But as we get people out to vote, encourage them to vote Republican up and down the line. And, you know, I can tell you based on the people that won in the primaries for some of the term-limited seats that the Michigan House, if it stays in Republican hands, will be more conservative than it is today. It'll be more conservative than the House that passed right to work. So, but you're exactly right. We need to all work together. We need to get out there and just hit the pavement, make the phone calls, spread the message to family, friends, and neighbors, get on social media. But the number one thing you can do is hit doors. If you're not able to physically do that, make phone calls. That's the best thing we can do because that takes our message right past the media and directly into homes. And we see from Prop 1 last summer that no matter how much the other side has spent, that we can still beat them as long as we get the message out there. And we've seen they've already put hundreds of millions of dollars up against Trump, whether it be the primary or earlier this year with Hillary and some of the PACs that are out there. And people see through that. So we just have to get our message out there. We see a very disciplined candidate. I worked with Kellyanne Conway on several projects here in Michigan. She's now the campaign manager for the whole campaign. And she's very smart and determined. For those that were Cruz, she was head of the Cruz Super PAC for a whole year before she joined the Trump campaign. And we just have to get out there and get it done and work together. So,
okay.
Thank you for that comment.
Well, we're going to have 2 more questions, and then we have other speakers here, so we'll continue with them.
Thank you.
Yeah, number one, how will the Trump administration renegotiate existing free trade agreements such as NAFTA, CAFTA, COREAFTA, the Colombia Free Trade Agreement, and others that Ms. Hillary helped to put into place?
Well, I think we've seen that with Mr. Trump when he went down to Mexico, and I think even Mexico acknowledged that the trade agreement needs to be reworked. So, you know, I think it's a false narrative to say that Mr. Trump is an isolationist or a protectionist. I mean, he wants the best deal for the American worker, not the best deal for international corporations that sell out the American workers. And people need a feeling that they can, if they play by the rules, they can get ahead. So, you know, he's already has the Mexico president on board to open up the trade agreement, and there's procedures they can go through. We need to keep the Senate Republican, so that's possible. And through the bully pulpit, he can apply pressure to Congress, to the Senate, to reopen those trade agreements. He can use the leverage of the federal government to extract some pain if certain countries don't want to negotiate.
I wonder if you can tell me if there's any headquarters offices that we can go to get the literature when it's ready to go door to door. The only one that I saw closest to Lapeer was Walled Lake, if there's one closer that you know of.
Sure. The state GOP has offices, I'll just go through them all, Traverse City, Utica, Livonia, Lansing, and Detroit. We're in the process of opening offices, victory centers in Marquette, Alpena, Jackson, downriver area, Trenton, Lansing, and Kalamazoo. And then we have in-kind offices coming on board for St. Clair, Walled Lake, Grand Rapids, Muskegon, and Battle Creek. But certainly, I don't know if Lapeer, do you have a place, an office, county? Okay. We'll get signs to Lapeer County GOP, and we're supposed to get over 100,000 yard signs, and I know not even, demand is so great that won't be enough, but we'll get as many out there and get them distributed. Yes. Yep.
Oh, that's good, because I'm about to get lynched.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to take just a couple more minutes here, and we have some pretty high political people here today. We want to hear from everybody who can. I'd like Mr. Mitchell, I'd like to let you have a couple minutes to speak about it.
I hope not.
Don't leave, Scott, because it was fun working with you when we got to do Proposal 1. Scott is amazing at getting information out at the grassroots. How did we defeat Proposal 1 so badly? It was brutal. We had a drinking game on Mackinac Island to try to come up with a proposal that would be beaten as badly as Proposal 1. We really did. There was a whole group of people that gathered trying to come up with one. We spent an evening and couldn't come up with one. How did we beat that, guys? They ran ads. They tried to scare everybody. What defeated it was all of you talking to your friends and neighbors and your family about telling them how important it was to get out to vote. 25% of the electorate turned out for a special election. It's a historic number. One of the things I'm proudest of, and I know Scott is, we got 25% of the election to turn out on May 5th for a ballot proposal because they were jobbing us for $2 billion a year because we were too lazy to come up with a better answer. Now, what could possibly be more important than this election? Scott's giving you some examples. Let me give you a couple of more that I think you need to think about. President Obama just went to the Far East, and the president of the Philippines called him a son of a whore. Now, do you think that anybody is going to call Donald Trump a son of a whore? Let me put it this way. I'm not running for president, but someone calls me a son of a whore, it will not be a good conversation. Probably short conversation, because I'm an Irish boy. But they did. And that's the level of respect we have in this world right now. Does anybody think Hillary is going to be any different? Worse. One other question to think about, and I understand Donald Trump and the Cruz folks. My wife, we endorsed Carly Fiorina initially because we thought that Carly, business experience, international experience, the way she communicated, we thought she was a good candidate. She didn't win. But here's the critical difference. Hillary Clinton has used her public office for personal gain. Tens of millions of dollars. To the tune of what, $150 million is her net worth? Now, barring me being incredibly stupid over the next, 60 days or 63 days, I'm honored to be your next congressman. I thank you all for the support. We won Lapeer County by 30 points. I really appreciate it. But would any of you be happy if I did anything like that or Gary did anything like that? He'd be organizing the mob to come run us out of the office. The Clintons have done that for their entire life, and it's now exposed in black and white. Now, you can say anything you want about whether Ted Cruz would have been better, or Carly Fiorina would have been better, or Jeb Bush, or Marco Rubio. I'm trying to think of a polite way to put this because Jamie's sitting there. But hell, at least they're not crooks. So seriously, put it all aside. Gary was in a primary. What was it, 11 people in your primary? I don't know. It was like a football game. I don't know. I only had 5 total, so it was relatively less painful than that. But when it's over, it's like I grew up in an Irish family. I was the oldest of 7 kids. We used to have family fights. They weren't pretty. But God helped someone take on the family. We may have differences exactly at a level of conservatism, exactly what to do. But if we don't stick together, if we go with divide and conquer, they are going to win, and we're going to get hosed. Thank you. I'll let you go.
Thank you very much. I'd like to have our House of Representatives speaker or representative come up and talk to us, Mr. Gary Howell, and tell us what's going on in Lansing for him. He's just getting off vacation, so don't expect a lot there.
Actually, the less they do in Lansing, the better off everybody in this room is. I'd like to follow up quickly on the main point tonight, which is we've got to win this election. We've got to win it from the top to the bottom. We cannot afford to have Hillary Clinton. Scott has already explained all the reasons why that cannot be allowed to happen. We are in a fortuitous position here. We have nominated Paul Mitchell, who is a solid, rock-solid conservative, to be our new congressman. I am a conservative. I'm doing the job in Lansing. I brought this little paper along because it's a list of the things that I am voting on, sponsoring, or co-sponsoring in Lansing. And I want to continually communicate with my voters as to exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and where I'm coming from. couple examples. I've co-sponsored 2 constitutional amendments. One would make this a part-time legislature. There is no reason I don't need to be in Lansing all year long, and neither do any of those other people. At least I vote no most of the time. A lot of them vote yes, and it only causes more trouble. I led a petition drive a few years ago to make it a part-time legislature. We got a lot of signatures, but not enough. So now I'm trying the other route through Lansing. There's no excuse for having as much government as we have in the state or the federal level. I have co-sponsored. You had a quick question? Pardon? No, it would not. They would leave term limits in place. To me, that's a separate issue. I think there are legitimate issues to debate on that. My bill simply makes it a part-time legislature. The people should vote, and they will only vote on it. Wouldn't be the legislature doing it. If they want to change term limits, it's up to the people. I'm perfectly happy to live with the term limits the voters have imposed. A series of bills that I have co-sponsored are to bring the governor and the legislature under the Freedom of Information Act and the Open Records Act. There is no excuse why you shouldn't have access to any legitimate document in the governor's office, in my office, or anybody else's office in Lansing. It's a travesty that we in Michigan, since 1976, have had an Open Meetings Act, an Open Records Act, and they have continuously exempted themselves. They've said, local governments, you got to do it, everybody else got to do it, but somehow we're above the law. It's time for a change. I spoke with the Speaker about it today. He has told me he will bring it up for a vote, and I promise if it comes to a vote, it will pass. But it's a real travesty. The Democrats are complaining about it now, even though they had control of government for 20-some years and never made an effort at all to do it. We Republicans are going to make it open so you can get the records upon request. An issue that Carol Brown raised, I have co-sponsored a bill to overrule the State Board of Education and provide that bathrooms in schools are for the sex that it says on the door. Another pet peeve of mine are the ungodly number of regulations. This gentleman mentioned them over here at the federal level, and it's equally bad at the state level. We seem to do our best in government to throttle business and throttle job creators and make it difficult to make the jobs available that our young people need. I've co-sponsored a bill that was passed through the House that has a prohibition. It would say the state of Michigan cannot adopt any regulation more stringent than the federal regulation. We've got way too many regulations now. I can't repeal the federal ones, but at least I can try to make sure we don't pile more on at the state level so that business has even a harder time creating jobs, and we all have a harder time living with the regulations that are out there. I've decided that I want to really get something done in Lansing. I have been fortunate in getting cooperation from the legislature and the governor on a few bills. I've already had one bill signed by the governor, which changed the definition of veteran to make it consistent across the board for all programs. So when a veteran goes in for assistance, he doesn't have to jump through the bureaucratic hoops of being able to figure out how does he fit this program, and that program. My bill that was adopted eliminates that. I was in 2 committee hearings today on 2 different bills, one in the House and one in the Senate that I've co-sponsored. They've both been passed by their committees now. One was brought up by our Lapeer County Sheriff having to do with this terrible opioid epidemic that is engulfing our community. The amount of heroin, the amount of pills is unbelievable. The deaths are unbelievable that are occurring. My bill, which I think is going to get adopted shortly, would make the antidotes available to the jail personnel, the correction personnel, to deal with the overdoses that they are forced to handle on a daily basis. One other bill that I worked on today that I think, again, will get passed is about the human trafficking epidemic we have in Michigan. It's hard to believe, but we are one of the main states for human trafficking. You would think maybe it's a state on the Mexican border or something, but it's not. Michigan has an incredible human trafficking problem, and there's all kinds of elements to it. But the bill that I've got in would allow for the expungement of the record for juveniles that are convicted of prostitution who are in fact human trafficked. So the young child that for whatever reason is forced into prostitution by a human trafficker, and they pick up prostitution convictions when they're under 18, they could later come back and have that removed from their record, because having it on their record makes it almost impossible to go for further education, to have job applications, to do the kind of things to pick them up out of that horrible, horrible situation. So, anyway, those are the kind of bills I'm pushing in Lansing. But I'm going to wrap it up because I know you've got a long meeting ahead of you and behind you. A couple of votes I've taken on bills that I did not introduce. One was the Detroit public school bailout. I was one of 6 Republicans to vote no on that bailout. I think it is incredibly unfair to ask the taxpayers of Lapeer County, who get about $8,000 per student to fund their education, to send another $700 million to Detroit, who is already getting $13,000 per student. This is an ongoing problem, and I don't like to be a pessimist, but I am as to Detroit public schools. They are corrupt, they are a disaster, they're wasting our money, and now we find that by a legal interpretation they've come up with, we can't even close any of their schools for 3 years, even though they've got schools that less than 5% of the students are proficient in any subject. I mean, it's unbelievable how dismal this situation is. We've got to get down there and turn this thing on its ear. We can't just keep sending more and more money to the same incompetent, corrupt officials to dole out and not educate any kids. I've got limited time. I don't want to take all of it. That's a part of what I'm doing. You can count on me to be a conservative in Lansing, represent your interests. I want to hear from you. If you've got any issues, contact my office, call me. I want to hear from you. Tim?
Thank you. Thanks, Gary. Okay. Well, it's nice hearing from everybody here. Miss Scott, are you able to stick around for a few minutes after this meeting to answer any other questions?